It is 8:38 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is September the 11th, 2025. This is episode 1166 of BitcoinAnd. Irina Zarutska, Nepal, Banksy, Israel, Gutter, Yemen, France, 5 prime ministers in 2 years, block everything movement, French social media ban threat, Poland invokes NATO Article 4, and Charlie Kirk. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday. All of this is falling out in relatively a week. If I sound somber, it's because I kind of am. I guess we should probably begin with Charlie Kirk and his murder yesterday, or rather his, I guess it was flat ass a political assassination. I'm not going to go through the grueling and graphic particulars of what happened, other than to say I didn't really ever listen to Charlie Kirk. I mean, I knew who he was. I knew that he pissed a lot of people off. I knew he was a conservative and a Christian, and I knew that he held several campus talks. It was one of his favorite places to go, was to a campus and essentially engage with the audience, many of his audiences disagreed with him, which I actually found kind of interesting, was that he would go to these college campuses that he knew that there would be people that vehemently not only disagreed with him, but vehemently, in a polar opposite way, disagreed with him, emotionally disagreed with him, psychologically disagreed with him, soulfully disagreed with him. He essentially kept walking into enemy territory. And yet, what did he do? He would simply just have discussions. And he was assassinated for it yesterday in Utah. So even though I'd never really sat down and watched a Charlie Kirk speech, or I never went to his YouTube channel, and it's not that I didn't like him, it's just that that kind of thing just, it doesn't turn me on. I'd rather listen to somebody, you know me, talk about soil or grazing or Bitcoin or something like that. And yet I was deeply affected by what happened yesterday. And it was right off the heels of, well, watching this poor woman get murdered on the train. That's the Irina Zarutska woman. If you did not know, she was murdered by getting knifed. And that sort of began my week, because even though that happened a couple of weeks ago, we didn't really find out about it until I think on Sunday is when it really blew up. And I was deeply affected by not only the fact that she was murdered, but that the people around her just kind of looked at what was going on. I mean, there was a black woman that was sitting right next to her on the other aisle, and she actually looked like it was just sort of an annoyance. You know, there was a couple of white guys that just kind of walked away. There was other people that it doesn't really matter really what the color of their skin is, does it? They're just people, and they just looked like it was almost a normal event that was something they just kind of wanted to slowly get up, and they didn't run and, didn't freak out. It was sort of like stepping in dog poop. It was just annoying. And that's what really got me. That's what really got me. Now, yes, I could go on about Charlie Kirk and the fact that everybody, well, not everybody, but so many people that would be considered liberal and on the left are celebrating. There's people that aren't, by the way. Let's be clear about that. Not every single liberal is celebrating and jumping up and down and cheering that Charlie Kirk was murdered yesterday, but there are plenty that are. And anybody who does is an idiot. It's like, I'm definitely not a fan of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, yet if either one of them were just flat assassinated in public or even in their homes, I'm not going to be jumping up and down with joy. And Charlie Kirk leaves behind 2 very small children and a young wife. He was 31 years old. I think he was born in 1997. But by the time he was 4 years old, or right around, when 9/11 actually occurred, so even Charlie Kirk himself probably didn't really know what was going on. You know? I mean, I drove my wife to work today, to a college campus, and I realized that we're celebrating my ass. We're being hammered over the head with the 24th anniversary of 9/11, and I realized that most of the people that are students on this campus weren't even alive when 9/11 happened. So, as much as it sucks to begin the show on a somber note, I just feel that it would be remiss if I hadn't have just said, look, and everybody's talking about a turning point, you know. Charlie Kirk's outfit was called Turning Point USA. So all over Twitter and all over Nostr, we're at a turning point or a tipping point or something like that. And honestly, in my mind, it's not just Charlie Kirk. France is in turmoil. Poland's invoking NATO Article 4. You got Israel bombing Qatar, of all things, and now Yemen. And Poland, by the way, invoked Article 4 because of a Russian intrusion of drones into their airspace. And I don't know if it's true. I wasn't there. I'm not going to say one way or another what I think about it, because, again, I'm not there. I'm not even in France, but it seems very evident that the French people are completely unhappy. Are we at a tipping point? Are we at a turning point? It certainly feels like it. I don't know what else to say about it. Will it tip over into just extreme violence? Will it tip over into real, actual, tangible change, which we desperately need? We don't as much need the violence as much as we need the change. But when Nepal burned down their prime minister's, the parliament as well as the prime minister's mansion, and were chucking politicians into the river, as much as I'm not all about the fact of going and chucking politicians into the river, because it is sort of an act of violence, this has to stop. And I'm not talking about like the protests and whatnot. I mean, the structure of the planet and the divide, not against the left and the right, but the powerful against the weak. It's got to stop. Because if it doesn't, then things are going to get much more violent. And my father always used to say, the world is ripe for a world revolution, a world civil war. And he's not wrong. He wasn't wrong when he said it a long time ago, and he's not wrong now. One of the things that I had mentioned in that list at the beginning of the show is Banksy. And if you don't know who Banksy is, he's an artist that is very, very well known for stencils and essentially public graffiti. And he put up a mural on the royal courts in Westminster, just outside of London. It's sort of like where the royal courts are. Basically sits on the border between the town of Westminster and London in the UK. And of course, they couldn't have a mural of a judge beating a protester holding up a bloody sign with a freaking gavel, so they scrubbed it off. Let's get into this one just to start us off. CNN. This is actually out of Associated Press, but CNN is reporting it here. Banksy, the mural of judge beating protester, is scrubbed from a London court. Well, let's see how the AP treats what actually happened. The verdict on Banksy's artwork on a courthouse wall of a judge beating a protester was that, well, it had to go. Unlike the elusive artist's other provocative works that are sometimes stolen or carefully removed and displayed in galleries or even sold at auction for millions of dollars, his latest mural was being erased Wednesday from the record. The stenciled spray painting of a protester lying on the ground holding a blood-spattered placard while a judge in a traditional wig and a black gown beats him with a gavel was scrubbed from the wall of the iconic Royal Courts of Justice. The order to remove it came from court administrators because the 143-year-old Victorian Gothic Revival-style building is valued for its historical significance and must maintain its original character, a spokesperson said. Metropolitan Police said officers were investigating a complaint that the work was an act of criminal damage. Banksy's spokesperson did not immediately return an email seeking comment. The work appeared Monday and was quickly covered up after Banksy posted a photo of it on Instagram, which is his usual method of authenticating his work. The artist, who has never publicly revealed his identity, is known for criticizing government policy on migration and war. While the artwork didn't make overt reference to a particular event or cause, some activists saw it as a comment on the UK government's ban on the group Palestine Action, which has been proscribed as a terrorist organization. On Saturday, almost 900 people were arrested at a London protest challenging the ban. The courthouse is home to the Court of Appeal and High Court, which have both weighed in on Palestine Action efforts to appeal the ban. Appellate judges initially rejected the organization's request to appeal, but a High Court judge then allowed it to go forward, though the government is challenging that decision. That's the end of the article. And my first question is, why did they immediately make an assumption and start talking about this being in connection with the group named Palestine Action? It's simply a judge beating a protester with a bloody placard. The placard doesn't say Free Palestine. The placard doesn't say anything about Gaza. The placard doesn't say anything at all. In fact, it's just got blood stained on it. That's it. So why are we going to Palestine Action? It's a diversion. In my opinion, it's a diversion. It's a distraction. It is, oh, look, something shiny over here. But here's what AP completely forgot to mention. Or maybe they didn't forget. Maybe they did it on purpose. And this is what I think Banksy's actual purpose is. If you've seen a lot of Banksy's works, you know that it's not really detailed in the interior. It's more like about shapes and outlines, something where the outline itself tells you the story of what Banksy is trying to relate. This is actually the very first time I've seen one of Banksy's works that is this detailed on the interior, like shading in the robes, like really defining the curls of the judge's wig, really defining, well, quite a bit. I've never really seen this much definition inside of a Banksy's work, and I'm talking about the interior, not the outline, and there's a reason I'm going this way. That's a lot of work that I've never really seen Banksy do on one of his things. So what happened? Well, they, like the news story did say, they scrubbed it from the wall. They hid it, and then they got behind, this tin roof material thing that they put up against it, and they had a guy, for whatever reason, in a helmet and a mask and black garb scrubbing this thing from the wall. And you know what happened? it now looks like something Banksy would have done, with not a lot of interior detail, but the outline. Oh my God, the outline. And then, as of this morning, somebody went over to where it was and painted it again, except it clearly was not a Banksy. It was somebody who was just painting inside the outline of what was left. It's almost as if Banksy may have used some kind of paint that, because this is a lot, as far as I can tell, this building is built out of limestone. If you were to put a heavy acid on that limestone, it would kind of dissolve. It would kind of, well, not dissolve, etch. Let's just say etch. It would definitely permanently mark. And I wonder if the paint that Banksy used had a very low pH, very acidic. And I don't know. Again, I'm not Banksy. I'm not a friend of Banksy. I don't go out and drink beer with Banksy. But there's something about the fact that they scrubbed this thing so freaking hard, and yet it is very clear that the outline is still there. That, to me, I think this is what Banksy actually meant to have happen. And now that outline was filled in again last night or yesterday sometime. I don't know. And somebody repainted it, except it's clearly, like I said, not a Banksy, and yet it's sort of a Banksy. It's sort of like Banksy, even though nobody knows who he is and nobody ever sees him do these things, is somehow a mentor to other street artists. And now I get the feeling that this spot, this wall, this 143-year-old facade that everybody is saying, oh, the only reason we did this is because it's a 143-year-old building. Bullshit. You did it because you cannot stand the message that is there, and it's now there permanently. And even if you sandblast that entire wall and get rid of all remnants, and then go back and somehow sand it down to where it's a smooth limestone facade again, I doubt seriously that anybody's ever going to forget this particular location. That's real power. Banksy knows how to do this shit. You may not agree with the message that Banksy says, but you got to admit, Banksy is very effective. And I think this is probably the most effective thing that Banksy has ever done. You want to go to Mars? Let's get out of this. Let's get out of the somber mood. Ladies and gentlemen, sending Bitcoin to Mars is now theoretically possible, according to researchers, and Braden Lindria from Cointelegraph is going to tell us all about it. There is apparently a way to get Bitcoin from Earth to Mars in as little as 3 minutes. Using already available technology. We just need someone or something to receive it. Last month, tech entrepreneurs Jose Puente and his colleague Carlos Puente published a white paper unveiling proof of transit timestamping, a concept he told Cointelegraph is the missing piece needed to make Bitcoin interplanetary. The concept suggests that when a Bitcoin user wants to send a payment to Mars in the future, the transaction could hop from the user through different stations such as ground antennas, satellites, and maybe even a relay around the moon. At each stop, the transaction is stamped before continuing until it reaches its destination. Speaking to Cointelegraph, Puente said POTT, proof of transit timestamping, serves as the receipt layer on Bitcoin and the Lightning Network while leveraging optical links built by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, e.g. NASA, Elon Musk's Starlink, or other satellite providers. Quote, the technology is essentially ready. The moment there's a stable Earth-Mars link, POTT can ride on top, making Bitcoin the first currency to operate cleanly across planets, he said. By simulating Mars-level delays, we could run a convincing end-to-end demo right now. That's a direct quote. When up and running, Puente said Bitcoin Lightning transfers could reach Mars in as little as 3 minutes or as long as 22 minutes in the worst case scenario. The average Lightning transaction would take between 12 and 15 minutes, while Bitcoin base layer transfers would take the usual 10-minute block time plus the signal delay. Addressing the 2-week blackout period on Mars that occurs every 26 months or so, Puente said a solution could deliberately route around the sun with relay satellites to avoid the blackout. POTT is like ordinary Bitcoin timestamping, except that it can extend to outer space and beyond, Puente explained. Quote, imagine it's 2050, and you're sending money from Earth to your friend on Mars to help pay for their rent. Because the planets are so far apart, the message has to hop through different stations. At each stop, that station stamps the message with the time it arrived and the time it left, like a passport getting stamped at every border crossing. By the time the message gets to Mars, you can look at all of the stamps and see the exact path it took when it moved, end quote. The concept builds on Blockstream's work in December of 2018 when it connected Bitcoin to 5 satellites to make outer space Bitcoin transactions possible. Then, in August of 2020, Space Chain completed what it said was the first Bitcoin transaction from the International Space Station, showcasing that Bitcoin can be received away from Earth. Of course, for a Bitcoin transaction to occur on Mars, a human or an AI would need to be there, and that hasn't happened yet. Only landers, orbiters, and rovers from NASA and other space agencies have explored Mars thus far. There would need to be someone there willing to accept Bitcoin too. The Jeff Bezos-funded Blue Origin started accepting crypto, including Bitcoin and a whole bunch of shitcoins last month, but so far they've only made it past the Kármán line, about 100 kilometers from Earth. Musk's SpaceX is looking to reach Mars by the end of 2026 with a long-term ambition to build a self-sustaining city there. Like Puente, Musk agrees that a standard money is needed to transact between Earth and Mars. He previously expressed concern over Bitcoin's 10-minute block times, but that's where the Lightning Network comes into play, Puente said. Quote, POTT plus the Lightning Network provide the practicality Musk asked for, local speed with global settlement that works across planets, end quote. After initially dismissing Bitcoin as a solution last January, he eventually agreed that interplanetary payments could be more feasible through the Lightning Network. Quote, if we're serious about a multi-planet civilization, we need an open, neutral monetary base that does not depend on any single company, government, or ground station, Puente said, making his case for Bitcoin as the most appropriate interplanetary currency. Quote, that's why we focused on Bitcoin as the shared standard and designed POTT as a practical way to move value across vast distances while preserving accountability and individual agency. Puente noted that POTT was built to be planet agnostic across the star's habitable zone, meaning the travel receipts it generates could be reached from transactions sent to the moon or any other planet. He said the research just focused on Earth and Mars as it's the cleanest near-time case study. Okay, interesting. Can we trust the timestamping? How will the timestamping be done? Well, that's actually talked about in the article that this article links to. I saw this, it was either yesterday or the day before. I saw the actual white paper. I have not been able to read it yet, but of this proof of transit timestamping, I'm certain that they have a much cleaner explanation as to how that works. So if you want to go read that, in the show notes today, this Cointelegraph article will be in the show notes. Just click it, and inside that is a link to the white paper if you want to get to it. But this reminds me of, I believe it was Dhruv Bansal did a couple of articles, if not 3 articles, talking about the center of hash, especially when it comes to interplanetary blockchain functionalities. In Dhruv's case, clearly he was talking about Bitcoin. But See, there's the issue. Mars is an interesting case because it's anywhere between 3 minutes away at light speed all the way up to 22 minutes away at light speed. So when Mars is closest to Earth, it takes 3 minutes to send out a message for Mars to receive any kind of radio transmission, which also moves at the speed of light, or an optical laser or something like that. But when it's on the other side of the sun, it takes 22 minutes. And as the article said, it's an average of 12 to 15 minutes, which is well outside the block times here on Earth. And Drew has a really good explanation as to what that actually means, how it works, and all that kind of stuff. And he has his own kind of ideas as to what could be done. But I'm really interested in this proof of timestamp or proof of transit timestamp issue. So I'm definitely going to be digging into that article, but I thought I'd bring it to you here because it's at least interesting. Well, yeah, it's at least interesting. And so is GreatGhee at GreatGhee.com. That's GreatGhee, GHEE.com. If you want some good handmade, 100% grass-fed ghee, you got to go over to GreatGhee.com. And if he's out of stock of that, and I'm looking at his website, and he is out of stock, he does have regular pasture-raised ghee. What is it? It's clarified butter. And what you do is you simmer butter for a long time and it gets rid of all the moisture and it makes all the rest of the protein settle out so that you're just left with this golden lactose-free oil with a nutty flavor and an extremely high smoke point. Dude, you can get this stuff up to 485 degrees Fahrenheit before you ruin it. And when your oil starts smoking, you've ruined it. I'm just saying. So don't go all the way up to 485. If you're going to fry something and you need to fry it at 450, ghee is the way to do it. Go to GreatGhee.com. Make sure that you use the coupon code BitcoinAnd. That lets GreatGhee know that I made him a sale. This is the Circle P. It is value for value advertising. And if he knows I made him a sale with you using BitcoinAnd as the coupon code, then he will get me back on the other end with sats, depending on what he thinks that sale was worth. It's how the Circle P works. GreatGhee.com. Use BitcoinAnd in the coupon code. Moving on, Bitcoin giant Strategy dodges yet another lawsuit alleging accounting wrongs. So if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I told you about the case that was dismissed. Well, actually, it wasn't dismissed by the judge. It was just dropped by the plaintiffs against Strategy. Well, there was more than one court case going on, or one or more than one lawsuit concurrently, and Decrypt's Matt DeSalvo is going to tell us about this second one. He says that another shareholder lawsuit alleging dodgy accounting practices at Bitcoin Treasury giant Strategy has been dropped. Documents filed Wednesday show the scrapped case brought in June by shareholders Abney Palmer and Zhenqiu Chen had alleged breaches of fiduciary duties, unjust enrichment, abuse of control, and gross mismanagement of the company. Wow. The dismissal comes just weeks after a different class action lawsuit accusing the company of misleading shareholders about how new accounting rules would affect its profitability was scrapped. That lawsuit, filed in May, was similar to the one in June, dismissed on Wednesday. A number of law firms and stockholders this year filed lawsuits against the company, alleging securities fraud over misleading Bitcoin investment statements. And experts told Decrypt that it wasn't unusual for law firms to file identical lawsuits against a company as they vied to become lead counsel in a consolidated case. Strategy is the world's largest corporate holder of Bitcoin. Yes, we know how much they hold. The company mainly used to sell data analysis software, but now buys and holds Bitcoin and lets investors buy shares of its NASDAQ-listed stock MSTR to get exposure to the cryptocurrency. Company co-founder Michael Saylor was turned on to Bitcoin in 2020, bought it, and claimed it was the best way to store value and save shareholders money. Strategy stock has since soared. It was trading for $14 a share the day the company first bought Bitcoin in August of 2020. Now, it's trading for $362 a share. That is a 2,160% increase. And Strategy has in the past run into trouble with regulators. In 2000, Saylor, who was Strategy CEO at the time, co-founder and chief operating officer Sanjeev Bansal, and former chief financial officer Mark Lynch settled a case with the SEC without admitting or denying charges of overstating the company's revenue or earnings. The three paid $10 million in disgorgement and $1 million in penalties. So the second lawsuit has been scrapped, and yet, as we've just read, there are more standing lawsuits against MicroStrategy. So the question becomes, will all these lawsuits collapse into one, or in other words, consolidate into one lawsuit that is able to get past the juncture of being dismissed or dropped and go ahead and actually fully sue the living daylights out of Strategy? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Meanwhile, we're going to run numbers. West Texas Intermediate taking it on the chin, almost 2 full points to the downside, 62.48 a barrel. Brent North Sea down 1.6 to 66.38. Natural gas down 2.25 to $2.96 per thousand, and gasoline is down 1.6% to $1.97 a gallon. Meanwhile, Bond crude, everybody's favorite light and sweet, is down 1.5 to 69.97. Gold down 1/4, but chilling out at 3,672 and 4 dimes an ounce. Silver is up 1.1%. Platinum is moving sideways. Copper is up 0.7%, and palladium is up 1.5%. Most of ag is in the green today. Biggest loser is lumber, 1 1/3 to the downside. Biggest winner is going to be chocolate, 1.2% to the upside. Live cattle is up over 1/2. Lean hogs are up 0.82%, and feeder cattle are also up 1/2. Meanwhile, and we had CPI numbers come out today, and inflation's running a little hotter than expected, and yet the Dow is up 1.25 point. Why do I say yet? Well, because that CPI number slightly decreases the chance that the Fed will cut rates. I think they're going to do that next week. They're going to make their decision on whether or not to cut or keep rates the same next week. Generally speaking, you would see if the numbers had been enough to really make a dent into everybody's thought process that the Fed is going to actually lower rates, then the Dow and the rest of its brethren in equities would not be in the green today. So that's why I'm saying that. 1.25% to the upside for Dow. S&P is up 0.75 point. NASDAQ is up 2/3, and the S&P Mini is up 1.25 point itself. $114,300 is the price of Bitcoin. That is a $2.28 trillion market cap, and we can now purchase 31.2 ounces of shiny metal rocks with our 1 Bitcoin, of which there are 19,919,307.43 of. Average fees per block are low at 0.02 BTC. Taken in fees on a per block basis, there are 40 blocks carrying 70,000 unconfirmed transactions waiting to clear at high priority rates of 1 Satoshi per VByte. Low priorities are the same. Hash rate has increased. So we are now at 1.05 zettahashes per second. 1.05 zettahashes per second. It's kind of interesting not having to say the word exahashes anymore, because if I was, it would be 1,005 exahashes. Or 1,050 exahashes. But now we've crossed the Z plane. We are now 1.05 zettahashes per second. So you can do with that what you will. And everybody came through on the boost and zaps yesterday. First up, I got to mention GreatGhee. GreatGhee, I can't thank you enough for the fat ass zap. In fact, I got to get the numerology here. So let me go over to, where do I want to go? I'm going to go to Jumble. Jumble.social is a really, really tight, very nicely well put together nostr client. It's light. It's fairly lightweight. It doesn't have DMs. All right. So just be aware it doesn't have DMs. But it does everything that I want. It does everything that I want, including watching GreatGhee zap me 69,400 Satoshis and says, achieve your dreams. GreatGhee, I cannot thank you enough. That really made my morning. That was literally the first thing that I saw when I woke up. It was absolutely awesome. Thank you again. BitGus2 with 5,000 sats says, boost. Misha with 5,000 sats says, I really appreciate the show and want to say thank you. Hope these challenging times around the world will pass soon. Yeah, Misha, you and me both. You and me both. Aggie Shoot with a row of sticks. 1111 says, Lukashenko, don't you know your European dictators? Sats for depression. Yes, I was saying Lushenko yesterday. That's not correct. Lukashenko, dictator. Yeah, he's probably a dictator. I'm not Eastern European, so I don't know my Eastern European dictators, dude. Oh, good. SLS. Wait, Sisley Round Dab. Your name's actually cut off here in Fountain app or fountain.fm, but you gave me 4,200 sats. Says here's a tiny little boost, way less than any BitcoinAnd episode is worth. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, you saying that. And Youth, dude, coming through 6,000 sats. See, I love seeing this. This is like, it means something to me. And it's not just the sats. It means that you're parting with your hard-earned sats, not because anything other than you're liking the show. You're finding value. That's all I want you to get out of this. You find value. If you do, punch over some sats to say, yes, I found value in your show. Keep doing what you're doing. Youth says, listening to the interview on the Forest Walker a few weeks back. As I listened, I closed my eyes and I saw walkers roaming environments while aerial sensors scouted overhead. Wildlife had evolved to further understand the walkers as just another species and had together formed symbiotic trust. The human groups who operated their infrastructure from a mesh of citadels in locations scattered the lands, seas, and sky had also evolved to communicate implicitly with many species and with each other. Aquatic farms integrated with citadels built along coasts and on islands. Networks of mycelium and the forest themselves guided much of the infrastructure development and research. National languages and currencies had mostly become obsolete, but remained to preserve the roots and origins of human evolution. The thoughts and work that stemmed from them became the capital, were still encoded and transacted through the planetary time chain. Cheers for the inspiration. Holy shit, Youth. I like all of that. I like the way that your brain works, dude. I really do. Moving on to Reed with 2,100 sats says, thanks for the NPM rundown. I'll be covering it this weekend at our meetup, so I appreciate the additional details. You're welcome, Reed. And I got an npub here that's not resolving into a name, but whoever you are, you gave me 1,000 sats. I'll bet you I know who this is because they don't say anything. And Pies with 121 sats says, thank you, sir. No, thank you. Digital Panhandler. That's it. Okay, it resolved. It was Digital Panhandler that said nothing but gave me 1,000 sats. BitGus2 gave me 5,000 sats and says, boost. Holy crap. You guys came out of the woodwork today. So now the ask is spread the show. Just spread the show. Don't give me sats today. 5-star review on Apple. You can't imagine how much that helps. It's amazing, but I get half of my traffic on Apple Podcasts, even though Apple Podcast Player is not a Podcast 2.0 enabled app. So when I get 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, whoa, Nelly, that changes everything. And I've got a lot now, but I mean, the more that I can get, the more that I show up, and the more that I show up, the more that the show is discoverable by other people. Why does that matter? Because it takes the donation load off of my current listeners and can spread it around to other people, right? So it's not just about asking my general listener base to say, hey, support the show, because you can support the show in many more ways than just Satoshis. Just say, hey, do you really want to know what happened in Bitcoin today? Here, try this podcast. Go to Apple Podcasts, say, hey, I'm going to throw this dude a 5-star review and write something meaningful. Like why you don't just do it because I asked you. Do it because you think it's worth it. If you don't think it's worth it, then don't do it. But if you do, then write something. Why do you think it's worth 5 stars? What is it giving you? What's the value? What's the value? That's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news that you can use. We talked yesterday about Nepal. I reiterated the Nepal situation at the beginning of today's show, and now we've got another angle on the Nepal story. This is from Atlas 21. Headline, Nepal in turmoil. 48,000 downloads for Dorsey's BitChat during protests. 48,000 BitChat downloads in Nepal. This is important. Nepal has been the scene of violent demonstrations against government corruption, which pushed tens of thousands of citizens to download the decentralized messaging app BitChat, developed by Block CEO Jack Dorsey. The political crisis in Nepal generated over 48,000 downloads in just a few days. According to data shared by developer Kali, the country surged from just 3,344 downloads last Wednesday to 48,700 by Monday. That is a 1,400% increase that made Nepal BitChat's top market worldwide. The previous week, Indonesia had recorded a similar spike during its own anti-corruption protests with 11,324 downloads. However, Nepal's figures are 4 times higher, underscoring the need for secure communications during political crises. In Nepal, BitChat gained popularity thanks to its use of Bluetooth mesh networks for encrypted offline communications. Launched in beta a mere 2 months ago by Dorsey, the app represents a further step forward in the field of decentralized communications. The BitChat network operates entirely without central servers, accounts, email addresses, or phone numbers, removing any infrastructure dependency. This decentralized architecture, inspired by Bitcoin principles, allowed Nepali protesters to communicate freely even during the government's shutdown of traditional social media platforms. BitChat's success in Nepal is directly linked to the government crackdown that hit the country, and authorities temporarily blocked Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and YouTube in an effort to curb the spread of anti-government content, triggering mass protests led by Generation Z. I am still not convinced that it's only Generation Z that's out there. All right, I think we need to put a cap on that. The response of security forces was brutal, with the use of live ammunition and tear gas causing at least 19 deaths and hundreds of injuries. Protesters set fire to Parliament and the Supreme Court while the government building of Prime Minister KP Sharma Oil was stormed. Oh, sorry, oil. Ollie. It looks like oil. I should know better. It's Ollie. BitChat in Nepal, freaking huge. So this leads me back to one of the items in my list at the front of the show. France. Macron just appointed his 5th prime minister in 2 freaking years. Does this sound like anywhere close to a stable country? Plus the fact, add on to it, that last week I had brought you news that France's economy is about to implode and their possibilities of talking to the IMF and probably the World Bank for some kind of French bailout. And now we're just like a week away, maybe a week and a half away from all that. And we've got massive protests in the streets. The blockade or the block action, I can't remember what they're calling this particular one, but it is extremely violent. The pictures I'm seeing on the streets in Paris, not like the yellow vest protest. The cops are not having any of it here. They are literally 5 deep in a line from building to building across the street with riot shields in front of them, and they're just running at the crowd and just bowling them over. This is probably going to get bad. I don't know what's going on today. I saw what I just described to you, I saw yesterday. So I have no idea what's going on today. Maybe they've suppressed everything. I don't know. But the question becomes, does Macron think that it's a good idea to shut down social media in France because he is floating the idea for the same reasons that the Nepalese government did? They don't want the spread of anti-government messaging across social media. So the question becomes, will we see BitChat download numbers spike in France? I hope so. I hope so. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Senator John Kennedy says the GOP is not ready to advance the crypto bill. Oh, I knew this was going to take forever. Vismaya V from Decrypt has it for us. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana challenged Senate Banking Committee Chair Tim Scott's September 30th deadline for advancing crypto market structure legislation on Wednesday, as experts warned of deep uncertainty over digital asset regulation and institutional readiness. Kennedy told reporters the committee isn't prepared to move on the Senate's version of comprehensive crypto market structure legislation that would complement the House-passed Clarity Act, according to a Politico report. Quote, "I don't think we're ready. People that I talk to still have lots of questions. I know I still have lots of questions," Kennedy said. The current legislative push follows July's passage of the Genius Act, which established federal rules for dollar-pegged stablecoins, but Kennedy dismissed that achievement as preliminary compared to the broader regulatory framework now under consideration. Quote, "As important as the Genius Act was, it's a baby step. This is a full leap, and we've got to get it right," Kennedy said. Yeah, when they want to delay something, they always bring in want to get it right excuses. Well, industry experts note that the stablecoin legislation represented a targeted approach focused on one asset class, while the proposed market structure bill would establish comprehensive rules across the entire digital asset ecosystem. Yeah, good luck. Quote, "Senate debate over the GOP's market structure bill highlights deep uncertainty about regulating digital assets," Nitesh Mishra, co-founder and CTO of hedging platform Chidex, told Decrypt. I love how I never hear about any of these companies, man. Mishra said one reason for the delay is that, quote, "traditional banks aren't ready for rapid change," citing risk management, compliance, and technology gaps that leave them wary of digital asset exposure. Quote, "Central banks often act as brakes," he said, insisting on strict consumer protection standards and limiting direct engagement with crypto. Now, well, without addressing those structural issues, Mishra cautioned fast-tracking sweeping reforms will remain unrealistic and potentially risky for broader financial stability. And the crypto industry has invested heavily in Washington lobbying to secure regulatory clarity, making the market structure legislation a top priority. Companies view clear federal rules as essential for operating in the U.S. market under the Trump administration's more favorable stance towards digital assets. The House's Clarity Act faced pushback from DeFi advocates who said that it would force platforms to implement centralized exchange-like restrictions. Scott acknowledged in August that Democratic support for the market structure bill may be weaker than the bipartisan backing that helped pass the stablecoin legislation, estimating somewhere between 12 and 18 Democrats will likely support the bill. Fewer than 18 fewer than the 18 Democrats who backed the Genius Bill. With Republicans holding a narrow 53-seat majority, Scott needs at least 7 Democrats to join a unified GOP caucus, but Kennedy's public doubts suggest even Republican unity cannot be assumed. This is going to take forever if it ever even goes through, guys. And maybe it's better for them not to have regulatory clarity. Maybe if they keep people confused, it's easier to control the actions of them. What does that sound like? Well, I'm not going to get into that one, but we are going to get into gold. Gold and Bitcoin, in fact. Cantor Fitzgerald launches Gold Protected Bitcoin Fund. Are you confused yet? God knows I am. Please, for the love of God, Alex Larry from Bitcoin News set us straight. Wall Street giant Cantor Fitzgerald has launched a new product that gives investors exposure to Bitcoin's growth while providing a safety net through gold. The fund, called the Cantor Fitzgerald Gold Protected Bitcoin Fund, is a 5-year vehicle that combines the digital assets upside with the stability of the precious metal. The idea is simple. Investors get 45% of Bitcoin's gains over 5 years, while gold acts as the buffer to protect their initial investment if Bitcoin goes down. In other words, investors won't get all of Bitcoin's upside, but they'll have a cushion if Bitcoin tanks. Quote, at Cantor, we create innovative products that reflect the shift in how Bitcoin is perceived, from speculative risk to strategic opportunity, said Brandon Lutnick, chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. Quote, this fund offers downside protection, giving investors a safer way to gain exposure into this growing asset class, end quote. The fund comes out of Bitcoin, The fund comes out as Bitcoin is trading near historic highs, but still being its volatile self. After reaching an all-time high of about 124,000 last month, Bitcoin has since fallen to just above 112,000. Gold, meanwhile, has hit fresh highs above 3,600 per ounce, proving it's still a traditional safe haven asset. Cantor's product tries to find a middle ground. As Bill Ferry, global head of asset management at Cantor, said, quote, this gold-protected Bitcoin strategy spans 5 years and tackles both risks head-on. It captures Bitcoin's upward trajectory while gold provides a safety net that historically performs well when markets decline, end quote. The firm says the structure minimizes short-term volatility and correlation spikes so that investors can focus on Bitcoin's long-term potential. Wait a minute. How are you going to do that in a 5-year vehicle? It's not exactly that long-term. Maybe it is. I don't know. I've been a Bitcoiner for so long, 5 years just seems like a blink of an eye. The idea is simple. The fund allocates capital in 2 components: Bitcoin for growth, gold for protection. Over the 5-year period, investors get 45% of Bitcoin's appreciation. If Bitcoin goes down, gold's performance helps protect up to 100% of the initial investment in dollar terms. Cantor Fitzgerald also notes the fund has rebalancing and loss thresholds as part of its risk management framework. These are designed to reduce drawdowns in turbulent markets while maintaining exposure to Bitcoin's overall trend. For example, if Bitcoin were to tank in a month, the gold would help absorb the loss. If Bitcoin rallies hard, the gold would cap the upside, but smooth out the volatility. This isn't a coincidence. Institutional demand for digital assets has grown significantly since spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds were approved in 2024. And those ETFs have helped normalize intraday volatility in Bitcoin markets, but many investors are still wary of the digital assets' history of wild price swings. Quote, with risk assets at or near all-time highs, timing and protection matter, Ferry said. Many institutional and high net worth investors are excited about Bitcoin's long-term adoption, but cautious about short-term risks. So exactly how this worked, Alex Larry did not really, go into, but I do find it interesting that we're starting to marry gold and Bitcoin in instruments that are created by the likes of Cantor Fitzgerald. And I do not expect this one to be the last of its kind, in fact, and it's going to piss Peter Schiff straight off. Guys, I like Peter Schiff, and the reason I do is not because I'm trying to be charitable, because he hates Bitcoin. I actually don't believe he hates Bitcoin. I think he finds a lot of engagement traction on Twitter and other platforms when he goes up against Bitcoin, but I think he's smarter than that. But he's never going to leave gold. And and I don't hate gold. I don't necessarily have a problem with gold itself. It's just I don't want to have to store it. I don't want to have to buy a safe for it. I don't want to have to worry about all the things that I would worry. I mean, a big safe with a lot of gold in it is eye-catching. Even if I put it in a closet somewhere, if somebody rummages through that closet that I don't want rummaging through and they see, they're going to go, shit, that's a big safe. I'll bet you there's something in there that's probably of value. That it becomes a target. Whereas a cold card is really small, easily hideable. And sometimes somebody can run across it and just think it's a calculator. I wouldn't trust that. I'm just saying. It's just, Bitcoin is just easier than gold for me. And it travels at the speed of light. All the way down to El Salvador, where Bitcoin Educators Unconference returns. Yay! Bitcoin News is writing this one instead of Alex Larry for Bitcoin News. It says, My First Bitcoin announces its 7th Bitcoin Educators Unconference following the successful events in San Salvador, Madeira, and Nashville. We are heading back to the mountains of El Salvador for the 3rd time. Cadejo Montaña. The Unconference embodies the vision and mission of My First Bitcoin to educate and empower the world with Bitcoin knowledge, but also to provide a social layer for educators to connect. My First Bitcoin aims to bring passionate Bitcoin enthusiasts together, fostering collaboration and networking. The event is rooted in the principles of an impartial, independent, decentralized, and community-led organization. Attendance is limited to only 150 people, and contrary to regular conferences, an unconference is a place where every attendee is a potential speaker. Everyone has the chance to pitch their ideas at the start of the event, which will subsequently be grouped in separate breakout rooms. Previous unconferences have been attended by a wide variety of educators such as Ben Perrin, BTC Sessions, Julian Figueroa, I cannot pronounce his name, Jeff Booth, and Preston Pish. But this event also welcomed many grassroots educational projects in the past, such as Bitcoin Akasi, Amity Age, and Bitcoin Indonesia. It attracts builders and educators from all around the world. And if you're interested in becoming a speaker, you can apply by submitting your ideas. And that is, submitting your ideas is a hot link to where they want you to go, which is, it's a Google Doc, and I'm not going to read you the URL. It's unreadable. We will open the stage for everyone to pitch their own idea at the start of the day. The sessions and activities are designed to reflect Bitcoin ethos, decentralized and collaborative events. And this means that we will be creating this event all together with input from all attendees. Past editions brought fruitful discussions about global education networks, grassroots adoption, Bitcoin communities, gamification of educational resources, tools for the youth, and more. The Unconference remains a high signal by being an intimate, limited space event, and get your tickets now at bitcoinunconference.com. That's bitcoinunconference.com. One more time for the guys in the back, bitcoinunconference.com. The 7th Unconference will be held at Cadejo Montaña on November the 13th during Bitcoin Week in El Salvador, the day prior to adopting Bitcoin. Complimentary drinks, snacks, and lunch will be served on location and are included in the ticket price. I don't think I saw a ticket price. Please note that My First Bitcoin is a nonprofit and aims to run break even with this event. Let's see, is there anything else? November the 13th, 2025, doors open at 10 a.m. The event starts at 11 and it closes at 6. So it's a one-day deal, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what they're charging for the tickets. Secure my ticket now. I'm going to secure $50. Not bad. $50 is a good price. Yeah, good price if you can afford to get to El Salvador, because for me, that would probably be a couple of $1,000s. So, I'm not really as much worried about the ticket price as much as the fact that no, I'm not flying on a plane I'm not going to pay somebody $2,000 so that I could be treated like crap for hours and hours and hours while I fly to El Salvador so that I can have fun with people that I want to be with. You guys, I love you guys, but dude, $2,000 on United States to buy a seat on United States Airlines at this point it's not on my bingo card. It's not ever going to be on my bingo card. Not unless Bitcoin hits I don't know. I'm not even going to say it. $1 million a coin. No, I'm just kidding. If you guys decide to go down there for the unconference, send pictures, send vlogs. Send vlogs. Vlogs would be good. We need to get the vlogs back. American HODL started it. Y'all need to complete it. I'll see you on the other side. This has been BitcoinAnd, and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.